The elevator in my building officially has 12 floors. That's what the metal panel says. That's what the worn inspection certificate says. That's what the building manager says every time he gives new tenants their keys, and the same tired speech about garbage days, quiet hours, and how the elevator acts old but never dangerous. 12 floors. No basement level. No service floor, no sub-level parking, just 1 through 12. I know that because I checked. More than once. More than I should have. Once this started, I checked the panel every single day like I expected the truth to suddenly appear as a new button between 12 and the emergency stop. It never did. And that would have made this easier, honestly, if there had been some obvious flaw. A hidden panel, a maintenance switch, a number that only lit up at certain times, something physical, something human. But there wasn't. I've lived in the building for 2 years. 7th floor, apartment 7C. The place isn't nice enough to be memorable, but it's decent. Old red carpet in the hallways, thin walls, a lobby that always smells faintly like bleach and radiator heat in winter. Most of the tenants keep to themselves. People nod in the elevator, stare at their phones, and disappear behind their own doors. The elevator itself is old in the way old things become part of the background. Brushed steel walls scratched by keys, grocery carts, moving boxes. Fluorescent light overhead with a faint buzz that everyone notices once and then forgets. The floor indicator above the buttons glows a dim red. When it moves, you can feel a slight hesitation between floors, like it thinks before committing. You stop noticing all of it after a while, until the first night it stopped on 13. It was just after midnight. I'd gotten home late from work, tired in that hollow mechanical way where your body is moving but your mind is still somewhere else. The lobby was empty. Rain had dried in streaks on the glass front door. One of the ceiling lights in the entryway was flickering weakly, giving the whole place that cheap, unpleasant strobe effect that makes everything feel a little less real. I pressed the call button. The elevator opened immediately, as if it had been waiting. Inside, the fluorescent light looked dimmer than usual, and I remember noticing that because it made my reflection in the metal wall look wrong somehow. Stretched, darker, around the eyes. I stepped in, pressed 7, and leaned back against the wall. The doors closed. The elevator moved. I looked down at my phone for maybe 3 seconds. When I glanced up, the floor display read 3, then 4. Then it flickered once, and changed to 13. At first I thought I'd misread it. That happens when you're tired. I blinked and looked again. The elevator slowed. My first stupid thought was, did they add a floor? As if a building could quietly grow an entire level overnight, and no one would mention it. The elevator stopped. The doors opened. It wasn't my hallway. That's the sentence I always come back to because there's no other honest way to say it. It wasn't dark, in the way a normal hallway is dark when the bulbs are out. It wasn't unfinished concrete or some hidden maintenance corridor. It was a hallway, yes, but wrong in every detail. The floor was bare, dark, and slightly reflective, like old linoleum under weak light. The walls were painted the same off-white as the rest of the building, but dingier, water-stained in long vertical streaks. And the corridor stretched much farther than it should have. The hallways in my building are short. You step out of the elevator, there are maybe 6 doors in either direction, and that's it. This hallway kept going. No visible end, no sound, no movement, No lights that I could see directly, and yet the place wasn't pitch black either. It had that low, sourceless illumination that belongs in dreams and hospital waiting rooms. I didn't step out. I just stood there, one hand still hanging near the button panel, waiting for my brain to resolve the image into something ordinary. It didn't. The air from the hallway felt colder than the elevator. Not a winter cold, a still cold, the kind that feels unused. After maybe 5 seconds, I hit door close. The doors shut immediately. The elevator moved again. A moment later, the display showed 7. When the doors opened, my actual hallway was there. Same red carpet, same beige walls, same ugly framed print near 7A that I'd passed 1,000 times without seeing. My floor smelled faintly of cooking oil and laundry detergent. Normal apartment smells, alive smells. I stepped out slowly and turned around. The display above the elevator said 7. Nothing about the elevator looked different. I stood there for a while, just looking at the closed doors. Then I unlocked my apartment, went inside, and spent half an hour convincing myself that exhaustion plus fluorescent lighting plus an old elevator was enough to make anyone see something weird for a few seconds. And for a while, that explanation worked. Not because it was good, but because I needed it to. For the next 3 weeks, everything was normal. I took the elevator up and down. It stopped where it should. The display read what it should. I kept expecting some tiny glitch, some confirmation that the first night had been a technical issue. Nothing happened. That should have helped. Instead, it made the memory of that hallway feel more isolated, more private, like the building had shown it only to me and then gone back to pretending. The second time happened at 2:42 in the morning. I remember that because I checked the time 3 times. I'd gone out late to get food from an all-night diner 6 blocks away after a failed attempt to sleep. It was one of those nights where your body is tired, but your thoughts feel sharp and restless, so you walk to kill the edge of them. When I got back, the lobby was empty again. Rain ticked lightly against the glass front doors. The elevator came down from somewhere above with a long metallic sigh. I stepped in, pressed 7, the doors closed. The elevator started upward, and before I even looked at the display, I felt it. The hesitation. That tiny pause between floors, longer than normal. Then the red number flickered. I said no out loud, quietly, to nobody. The elevator stopped. The doors opened. The hallway was there again, but this time it had doors. That was the first detail I noticed. Not 6 or 8, but dozens of them. Both sides of the corridor, lined with apartment doors, painted the same dull brown as the ones on every floor of my building. Each one had a metal number plate beside it, except the number plates were blank, not removed, not scratched off, just blank metal rectangles screwed into the wall where numbers should have been. I stayed inside the elevator and leaned slightly forward, squinting into the distance. The corridor seemed even longer than before, and the farther down it went, the flatter the light became, until doors and walls lost contrast and started to blur into one long, pale tunnel. Then one of the doors, maybe 20 feet from the elevator on the right side, opened an inch. Just an inch. No hand. No sound. Just that small shift in darkness, where the door came away from the frame. The part of me that still wanted reason tried to assemble one. Maybe another tenant. Maybe I'd somehow ended up on a real floor I didn't know existed. Maybe there was a section of the building under renovation, and they'd left the numbers off. Then I noticed there were no sounds at all. Not distant plumbing, not a TV, not a door latch, not even the elevator motor idling behind me. I hit door close so hard my finger slipped. The door shut. The elevator moved. At 7, my hallway opened in front of me like a relief so intense it almost felt painful. That night I slept with the lamp on in the living room, not because I thought the light mattered, but because I couldn't stand the idea of full darkness pressing up against my apartment walls. The next morning I asked the building manager. His office was a glass box off the lobby with a fake wood desk and a filing cabinet that looked older than the building. He was drinking bad coffee from a paper cup and doing something on his computer that looked mostly like solitaire. "Hey," I said, trying to sound casual, "does this building have any kind of maintenance floor or unused hallway level?" He squinted up at me. "What?" "Like a service floor. Hidden access. Something above 12. "No. Definitely no 13? He laughed once. "You think we're that fancy?" "I'm serious." He leaned back in his chair. "There's roof access from 12. That's it." "What about old layouts? A sealed floor?" He shook his head. "There's no 13th floor. Never was. Place was built in the 70s. What happened?" I almost told him. Instead I said, "Elevator display glitched." He shrugged. "Yeah, it does that sometimes. Wiring's old. Have you ever seen it show 13? "No." He said it too quickly. That stayed with me longer than it should have. For the next few days, I started paying attention to other people in the building. Not in some detective way, just listening more closely. A woman from 9B complained in the lobby that the elevator felt weird at night. An older man from 4A said he always took the stairs after midnight because the machine makes bad choices when it's tired. He laughed when he said it, but not enough. I asked what he meant. He looked at me for a second too long, then said, "Gets stuck. Opens where it shouldn't." Then he walked away before I could ask more. That was the first time I felt the edges of something shared, not explained, not discussed openly, but known in the way people in old buildings know where the pipes knock, where the floor dips, which windows don't latch in winter. A private map of inconveniences and warnings that never makes it into writing. I should have stopped using the elevator then. I didn't. I told myself I wanted answers. That's not the full truth. The truth is that once you've seen something impossible twice, a part of you starts waiting for it to happen again. Fear and curiosity begin to look the same from a distance. The third time, the doors didn't open. It was early evening, around 6:30. I'd just gotten home with groceries. The elevator was empty except for me and 2 paper bags cutting into my fingers. I stepped in, pressed 7, and felt the old machine rise. The display hit 4, then 13. My stomach dropped hard enough that I nearly lost my grip on the bags. The elevator stopped. The doors remained closed. For 2 seconds, nothing happened. Then something knocked from the other side of the door. 3 slow knocks. Not mechanical banging, not a cable shift. Knuckles, measured and deliberate. I froze. The knocks came again. 3 more. Same pace. Same weight. The hallway, if it was there, was outside the elevator. That meant someone, or something, was standing in front of the closed doors, waiting. I didn't breathe. I didn't move. The fluorescent light above me buzzed louder, or maybe I only noticed it because the silence had narrowed. Sweat started down my back. One of the grocery bags slipped from my hand and hit the floor with a soft crunch of produce. The knocking stopped. After a few seconds, the elevator began moving again. At 7, the doors opened to my normal floor. A teenager from 7A was standing there with headphones around his neck. He frowned at the grocery bag on the floor and said, "You okay?" I looked at him like he'd interrupted a funeral. "Did you hear anything?" I asked. "Hear what?" "When the elevator stopped." He glanced inside, then back at me.
"It just got here." I stepped around him and left one of the bags behind. That night, I dreamed of the hallway for the first time. In the dream, I stepped out of the elevator and saw all the blank number plates. Then, one by one, numbers began to appear on them, black digits bleeding through the metal like ink through paper. 1A, 1B, 2A, 2B. Every apartment in the building laid out in a single impossible corridor. Somewhere near the middle was 7C. I knew without moving toward it that my front door was slightly open. I woke with my heart racing so hard it hurt. After that, I started taking the stairs at night. For 2 weeks, nothing happened. I used the elevator during the day when other people were around and the stairs after dark. It felt childish, but it worked. The building went back to being a building. My sleep improved. The strange dream faded. Then the power went out. It happened on a Thursday evening around 10. The whole block went dark for a few seconds. Then the building emergency lights kicked in, weak amber bulbs in the stairwells and lobby, just enough to keep people from breaking their necks. The hallways on the upper floors stayed mostly dim. My phone flashlight became the only reliable light in my apartment. I'd been out getting batteries and bottled water from the corner store when it happened. When I came back, the stairwell lights were barely glowing. The idea of climbing 7 dark flights with grocery bags and a dead phone battery felt miserable. The elevator still had emergency power. I stood in the lobby for maybe a full minute, arguing with myself. Then I got in. The emergency light inside was much dimmer than normal, turning the metal walls yellow-gray. The display was still lit. I pressed 7. The doors shut. The elevator shuddered upward more slowly than usual. At 3, 4, 5, the numbers changed normally. Then the display jumped to 13, without flickering. No glitch, no hesitation, just 13. The elevator stopped. The doors opened.
The hallway was there, and this time someone stood at the far end of it, too far to see clearly. Human height, motionless, a silhouette cut out of the weak ambient light. I couldn't tell if it was facing me. Then it moved, not toward the elevator, but sideways, toward one of the doors. It opened the door and stepped halfway inside. Just before the door shut, I saw a number beside it. Not 7C, just 7. A building floor, not an apartment. That didn't make sense because these were apartment doors. But once I saw one number, the others began to resolve themselves in the dimness, not by becoming visible, but by becoming imaginable. A corridor where every door was a version of a place in the building, stripped of detail and lined up together by some other logic. Then someone stepped into the space directly outside the elevator, close enough that I saw the face. It was me, same coat, same height, same hair, damp from the mist outside, but older, not decades older, not enough to be ridiculous, just wrong in the way a face looks when it has spent too long holding the same expression. Tired around the mouth, eyes sunk slightly deeper, skin paler, stretched thinner over the cheekbones. The older version of me looked at me without surprise. Then he reached a hand into the elevator and pressed 7 on the panel. The doors closed. The elevator moved. I was too shocked to react until the doors opened on my actual floor. My hallway was normal again, but when I walked to my apartment, the number plate beside my door was missing. Not loose, not broken off, just gone, leaving 4 clean screw holes in the wall. I stared at the blank space for so long that my neighbor from 7B opened her door and asked if I was okay. I pointed at my wall. Was there always a number here? She looked. What? My apartment number. She frowned. You mean 7C? There was a plate. There still is, she said slowly. I looked back at the wall. The number plate was there. 7C. Brass. Scratched. Familiar. Normal. I said something stupid. Sorry, long day. And went inside. That was the first time I seriously considered the possibility that I was losing my mind. Not in an abstract way, not a vague, maybe stress is getting to me. I sat at my kitchen table with all the lights on and made an actual list of explanations. Sleep deprivation, anxiety, carbon monoxide, a neurological issue, a reaction to medication. I bought a carbon monoxide detector the next morning. It read normal. I scheduled a doctor's appointment. Blood pressure slightly high, not surprising. Blood work normal. The doctor asked if I was under unusual stress. I lied and said work had been rough. I didn't tell him about the elevator. I didn't know how. Days passed. The elevator behaved normally. I began to think maybe naming all the possibilities had broken the spell. Then, one Sunday, just before dawn, I woke to the sound of the elevator moving. My bedroom window faces the inner courtyard, and in the early morning quiet, the mechanics echo strangely through the building. Usually I don't notice them. This time I did. The whir of cables, the soft stop, the faint chime of the doors opening. Then nothing. No closing. No movement. The doors had opened somewhere, and stayed open. I lay in bed listening. Eventually I got up and walked to my apartment door. I stood there in the dark, with my hand on the lock, feeling ridiculous. Then I heard footsteps in the hallway outside. Slow. Heavy. Not many of them. Just enough to tell me someone had gotten off the elevator and was walking past the apartments, one by one. Then they stopped. Directly outside my door. No knock came. No handle turned. After maybe 20 seconds, the footsteps resumed. They continued down the hallway until I couldn't hear them anymore. A moment later, faintly, I heard the elevator doors close. It moved again. That should have been enough to keep me from ever using it. Instead, it made me need to know what happened if I followed. So I started watching. I changed my routine. I took the stairs in the evening but stood in the lobby late some nights pretending to check email while keeping the elevator in my peripheral vision. Once, around 1:20 a.m., it came down empty, from somewhere above 12, even though no one had called it. Another time, the floor indicator blinked 8, 9, 10, then went dark for 2 seconds, before showing 1 as the doors opened. I began keeping notes, dates, times, what I'd seen, which nights the air in the lobby felt colder, which nights the hallway lights on my floor buzzed louder. It sounds obsessive because it was, but once fear becomes routine, it starts disguising itself as method. Then I met Elena from 11B. Not met exactly. I knew her face from the building, but we'd never talked beyond polite nods. She was maybe 40, lived alone as far as I knew, always carried a canvas grocery bag, and looked like she hadn't slept enough. One night I ran into her in the lobby just after midnight while I was pretending not to wait for the elevator to do something strange. She looked at me, then looked at the elevator. "You hear it too?" she asked. I said, "Hear what?" She gave me a tired smile that didn't reach her eyes. "The floor that isn't there." Everything in me went still. I don't remember deciding to follow her, but suddenly we were in the laundry room basement annex, even though the building technically didn't have a basement, just a half-sunken utility level off the back stairs with washers and a storage closet. She sat on top of one of the machines, folding and unfolding the handle of her grocery bag. "How long?" she asked. I told her. She nodded like it matched something. "It doesn't happen to everyone," she said. "Or maybe it does, and most people don't notice. Some people ride it drunk at 2 a.m. and forget by breakfast. Some people see the doors open once and never again. But if you see it more than twice, you start being part of it." "That doesn't mean anything," I said.
"No," she agreed. "Not until it does." I asked her what the 13th floor was. She looked at the buzzing fluorescent light overhead before answering. "I think it's the building without time in it." That was such a ridiculous sentence I almost laughed. Instead, I said, "What does that mean?" "It means everything is there at once," she said. "Every apartment, every version of every floor, every tenant who waited too long at the wrong hour. Maybe it's old, maybe it's new, maybe it's not a floor at all, but it keeps a copy." A cold feeling slid down my back. A copy of what? She looked at me for a long second. "Whatever rides it enough." I told her about seeing myself. She didn't look surprised. "That's the bad part," she said softly. "When it starts trying the shape on." I asked why no one ever talks about it. "Because when people do, they sound crazy. Because most of them move out before it gets bad. Because a few of them don't." I wanted to ask what happened to the ones who didn't, but I already knew I wouldn't like the answer. Before leaving, she said one more thing. "If it stops on 13 and the door's open, don't step out. No matter what you see. Especially if you see someone you know." Then she left me in the laundry room with the washer hum and the smell of bleach and damp concrete, and the unpleasant certainty that she believed every word. I should have moved out. I thought about it. I even looked at listings. But moving is expensive, and the human mind has a talent for shrinking impossibility into inconvenience when daylight comes. I told myself I could outlast it by avoiding the elevator, by keeping my life simple, by not giving it more attention than it already had. That lasted 9 days. On the 10th day, I came home late with 2 bags of groceries and found the stairwell locked for repainting. Plastic sheeting covered the lower landings. A handwritten sign said, "Use elevator until Monday." I stood in the lobby, staring at the sign, for a long time. Then I got in. The elevator felt normal. Too normal. Bright, clean, empty. I pressed 7. It began moving. Then, without flickering, 13. My breath caught. The elevator stopped. The doors opened. The hallway was brighter than before. Not well lit, never that, but clearer. I could see farther down it now. The doors on both sides were more distinct, and the number plates were no longer blank. They had apartment numbers. 1A, 1B, 2A, 2B, 3C, not grouped by floor in any meaningful order. Just all of them threaded together in one long corridor, as if the entire building had been taken apart and laid end to end by someone who didn't understand normal space. About 10 feet from the elevator, on the left side, was 7C.
My apartment door, slightly open. Warm yellow light spilled through the gap, exactly like the lamp I leave on in my living room when I come home late. I gripped the grocery bags so hard, the plastic cut into my fingers. From inside that half-open door, I heard something impossible. My own TV. A commercial voice I recognized from a streaming ad I'd seen earlier that week. The volume set exactly where I usually keep it. I knew, with a certainty so complete it felt physical, that if I stepped out of the elevator and walked into that apartment, it would smell like mine. The same detergent, the same dust, the same half-dead plant on the windowsill in the kitchen. It would feel more like home than the real one upstairs, because it would have been arranged for me, and someone would already be inside. I don't know how long I stood there staring at my own slightly open door. Then, from farther down the hall, another door opened. A man stepped out of 4A. I recognized him immediately. Mr. Daly, the older tenant who'd once joked that the elevator made bad choices when it was tired. Only it wasn't quite him. Same face, older than when I'd last seen it. Thinner. Expression flattened down to something distant and patient. He looked toward the elevator, saw me, and didn't react at all. Then another door opened. 11B. Elena stepped out, or something wearing Elena's face did. Same grocery bag in her hand, same tired posture. But when she turned toward me, there was nothing human in the calm of her expression. Not menace, not hunger, just recognition so complete it made my stomach turn, like she'd been expecting me. Then she lifted a hand and pointed, not at me, but at 7C. The invitation was so simple it felt rehearsed. I hit door close. The doors shut slowly this time, almost reluctantly. Just before they met, I saw movement inside 7C. A figure crossed the living room. My figure. The doors sealed. The elevator didn't move right away. For one terrible second, I thought it had decided not to let me go. Then it shuddered and began descending instead of rising. At 6, it stopped. The doors opened onto a darkened version of my real 6th-floor hallway, empty and dim, but still normal enough to be human. I got out carrying my groceries and took the stairs the rest of the way up, nearly falling twice. When I reached my apartment, my door was closed. Locked. My lamp still on. TV silent. Everything looked exactly as it should. But on the kitchen counter, beside the groceries I'd just carried in, was a second carton of milk. Same brand. Same size. A brand I don't buy. It was cold. After that, I stopped telling myself I could outlast it. The building had crossed the line from being something I encountered in one place to something that could edit the edges of my life. I called in sick to work. I packed a bag. I booked a motel room outside the city for 3 nights. I didn't care if it was irrational. I just needed distance. The first night at the motel, I slept badly, but without dreams. The second night, around 1 a.m., I woke to the sound of an elevator moving. I sat up so fast I almost fell out of bed. The motel had exterior corridors. No elevator. The sound came again anyway. Cables, motor, the familiar mechanical rise and stop I knew from my building. Then a soft chime. Then silence. Footsteps passed outside my motel room door. Slow. Heavy. They stopped. I stared at the gap beneath the door, waiting for a shadow. None came. After a long minute, the footsteps continued. I didn't go back to sleep. The next morning, I checked out and drove straight back to my apartment. Because leaving had made something worse. It had proven the elevator wasn't just in the building anymore. Or maybe I'd brought it with me the moment I recognized it. When I got home, there was a note
taped to my apartment door. No name, no envelope, just a folded sheet of lined paper. Inside, written in blocky, careful letters, was one sentence: "You missed your floor." I threw it away immediately. Then I dug it out of the trash 20 minutes later, because throwing it away hadn't made it less real. That night I made the worst decision of the entire experience. I waited for the elevator, not to ride it, to be there when it arrived. At 12:47 a.m., the lobby was empty. I stood 10 feet from the doors with my coat on and my keys clenched in one fist. The building felt unusually still. Even the radiator knocks seemed muffled. At 12:51, I heard it descending from above. Not from 12, from higher. The indicator above the lobby doors didn't show numbers. It stayed blank as the motor sound approached. The elevator arrived, the doors opened, empty, no one inside, no reflected face in the metal walls except mine. Then, slowly, the display inside the cab lit up. No button pressed, no movement yet, just the number glowing over the panel like an instruction. I should have walked away. Instead, I stepped inside. I told myself I wanted control, that if I entered by choice, maybe I could leave by choice too. The doors closed behind me. The elevator did not move upward or downward in any way I could feel.
There was no lurch, no shift in weight, just the hum of machinery and the stale smell of metal and electrical dust. The display stayed on 13. Then the doors opened. The hallway was waiting, brighter than ever, longer than before, and full. Not crowded exactly, but populated. Doors stood open along both sides, each revealing fragments of apartments I recognized from the building. A floral rug from 2B, the weird green lamp from 10A, a bicycle propped against a wall from 5C. Lives copied and arranged along one impossible corridor like exhibits. At the far end, where the hallway dissolved into pale distance, the elevator from the other side stood open too. Another car, another doorway. And standing between the two elevators halfway down the corridor was me. Not the older version I'd seen before. Several versions. One in my work clothes from the first night I saw 13. One in the coat I wore to the motel. One with a week's worth of stubble and bruised shadows under the eyes. And one that looked almost normal, almost current, holding my keys in one hand. All of them were watching me. I couldn't breathe. The nearest one, the almost current one, took a step toward me, then another. I backed into the rear wall of the elevator. He stopped a few feet away. Up close, he smelled faintly like my apartment. Detergent, dust, old coffee. "Don't make me come in there," he said. It was my voice. Flat. Tired. Completely certain. I said the only thing that came into my head. "What are you?" He looked at the others in the corridor, then back at me. "The parts that stepped out," he said. My mouth was dry. "Stepped out of what?" He gave me a small smile that felt worse than anger. "The same place you're still standing in." I looked down the hallway again. Every version of me held still in the weak light. Some had keys. Some didn't. One had a grocery bag cutting into his fingers. One looked like he'd been crying. One had a cut on his cheek that I didn't remember ever receiving. "You're copies," I whispered. He tilted his head. "No," he said softly. "You are." That sentence hit harder than it should have. Something about the certainty in it made the elevator walls feel suddenly too close. He lifted a hand and pointed past me, toward the inside of the elevator. I turned instinctively. The metal wall behind me reflected the corridor. And in the reflection, the elevator was empty. No me, no body, just the open doors
and the long, impossible hall behind them. My stomach dropped so fast it hurt. I spun back around. The almost current version of me was closer now. "You keep thinking you live in 7C, he said. "You keep thinking that's the place you return to. But you've been riding between versions since the first night. You just noticed too much to stay comfortable." "That's not true." "It is," he said. "Ask yourself why the door plate disappeared before it didn't. Why the milk was there. Why the footsteps stop at your door. Why the elevator only shows you what's already taking shape." I shook my head. No. His expression didn't change. "There is a copy for every time you step out at the wrong moment," he said. "Some stay near their doors, some wander. Some remember enough to warn people, most don't." I thought of Elena, of Mr. Daly, of the tired calm in their faces on that corridor. "Why me?" I asked. "Because you looked back," he said. "The other versions of me began moving then, not rushing, just drifting, slowly, out of open doorways and into the corridor. Not toward me exactly, more like taking their places in something already arranged." The almost current version extended his hand. It held my apartment key, my actual key, scuffed blue plastic tag, tiny chip in the metal edge from where I once dropped it in a parking lot. I stared at it. "If I take that," I said, "what happens?" He looked down the corridor toward the other elevator at the far end. "You go home." "And if I don't?" He was quiet for a moment. "Then, you keep hearing the doors open outside places that shouldn't have them. I don't know why I took the key. Maybe because it was mine. Maybe because home is the strongest word in the world, even when it's being used against you. Our fingers touched briefly when I took it. His skin was cold. The moment the key settled in my hand, every open apartment door along the corridor shut at once. The sound rolled down the hall like a single closing breath. The almost current version of me stepped back. The elevator doors behind me began sliding together. I lunged forward on pure reflex, trying to stop them, but they closed too fast. The last thing I saw before they met was all the other versions of me turning at the same time to look toward the far elevator, as if something had arrived behind it. Then the doors sealed. The elevator moved, or seemed to. When it opened again, I was on 7. My real hallway, red carpet, beige walls, ugly print near 7A. My front door stood open. Inside, my apartment lights were on. I stepped in slowly. Everything was as I'd left it. Couch, kitchen counter, jacket over the chair. But on the hallway table sat a folded grocery receipt from the diner I'd visited weeks earlier. On the back, in my own handwriting, was a message I had no memory of writing. "Don't let it open when you're inside." I read it 5 times. Then, somewhere out in the building, I heard the elevator arrive. The chime was faint but unmistakable. The doors opened, and a second later I heard footsteps in the hallway outside my apartment. Slow, heavy, deliberate. They passed 7A, then 7B, then stopped at 7C. At my open door, I couldn't move. The silence stretched. Then, very gently, like a hand too careful to be human, my front door began to swing shut on its own. It didn't slam. It just kept moving until the latch clicked. The footsteps remained outside for a few seconds longer. Then, they continued down the hall, toward the stairs. I didn't sleep that night, or the next. I moved a chair in front of the door, then a table, then both. The elevator kept moving in the building at odd hours, always with that same measured pattern. Rise, stop, chime, open,
Sometimes footsteps followed, sometimes not. Once, at 3:06 a.m., I heard what sounded like someone setting a grocery bag down outside my door. In the morning, there was nothing there. Elena disappeared a week later, or moved out, or stepped out too far. No one in the building seemed sure. Her mailbox stayed full for days before someone emptied it. I almost knocked on 11B, but I already knew I didn't want to see whether the number plate beside her door was still there. I still live here. That sounds like the part that should make me look stupid, but leaving no longer feels like leaving. Every place with an elevator feels connected now by the possibility of the wrong stop. Every blank corridor in every hotel, every office building after dark, every mirrored elevator wall carries the same hidden question. I take the stairs whenever I can, but sometimes when I come home tired enough or carrying too much, I make the mistake of stepping into the elevator and feeling relieved when it's empty. That's always how it begins. The panel still shows 12 floors. There is still no button for 13. But once in a while, usually after midnight, the display flickers. And if I'm unlucky enough to still be inside when it does, the red number appears exactly where it shouldn't. Sometimes I close my eyes until the doors shut again. Sometimes I make the mistake of looking. And every time I look, the hallway is a little clearer, the doors a little more familiar, the copies a little closer to being people I know. Last week, I saw my own apartment door standing open again on that corridor. This time there was light inside and music playing softly, something from a playlist I use when I can't sleep. And standing just beyond the threshold was me. Not older, not worse, exactly me. Current clothes, current face, current tiredness. He smiled like he'd been waiting a long time for me to catch up. I hit door close before he could move. The door shut. When I got to my real apartment, my front door was unlocked. I don't remember leaving it that way. Maybe I didn't. That's the part I understand now. The part Elena was trying to tell me in the basement laundry room. It isn't one hidden floor. It isn't one hallway. It's a place made of every moment someone waits just a second too long in the wrong elevator, looks out the wrong doors, recognizes the wrong room as home. The building doesn't have a 13th floor, but the elevator does. And one night, whether by mistake or exhaustion or curiosity, I'm going to step out when it opens, because the hallway will look too familiar, because my own front door will be standing there with warm light spilling out, because somewhere inside I'll hear my TV playing and smell coffee and know with perfect certainty that if I just walk in, I can finally stop listening for the doors outside my real apartment. And if that happens, if one night I choose the wrong home and the elevator closes behind me, then the footsteps you hear outside 7C won't be someone looking for my number anymore. They'll be me, checking every door on the real 7th floor, one by one, waiting for the moment mine opens from the inside, so I can see which version of me still lives there and whether he's tired enough to let me in.